Food prices are high, rent is high, home prices are ridiculously high, cars are high, auto insurance, home insurance, health insurance is insane. Energy prices are high. I can tell you that in my own electric bills. They're much more expensive than they were even a year ago. Food.
Holy shit. So Donald Trump is going to be stunned. Two of his top and highest profile allies, Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson, are openly shit-talking his administration by revealing that he's failed spectacularly to lower prices for the American people and that everything has skyrocketed on his watch, even compared to the Biden administration, which Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene loathe. It just goes to show how, even though I am sure they go out of their way to say, I don't blame Donald Trump. Donald Trump's different. I'm just saying, and it's not Trump's fault. I'm just saying that everything sucks now that he's president and is a lot worse. We are starting to see, again, the embers being stoked of a bit of a MAGA rebellion, perhaps because people are imagining a world without Trump or a world beyond Trump in the future. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, folks, again, we recently have done videos about Marjorie Taylor Greene's ongoing rebellion. As was reported a couple of weeks ago, Trump is perplexed by this. He's like, what's Marge doing? I'm confused. Tucker Carlson, again, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, he tries. He's like, I'm not blaming Trump. I've supported Trump. And yet, in thought and deed and word, goes out of his way to criticize large swaths of the Trump administration. There's a cognitive dissonance there. Both of these people recognize that much of their significance and relevance ties to their association and goodwill from Trump, and yet they seem to have legitimate disagreements with Trump and are perhaps considering what will life be, because both of them are relatively young in their 40s and early 50s. In the case of Marjorie Taylor Greene, I think she just hit 50. What will life be like in 10 years when Trump is dead or out of power, when he dies of old age? Remember, Trump is like 80 years old already, right? So with that in mind, let's look at some of these other clips. Very fascinating stuff.
We should be at work on our committees. We should be doing investigations. And you want to know something? We should be passing the discharge petition that Thomas Massie put in to release the Epstein files. Those are the things that we should be doing. And most of all, Tucker, we should be passing our appropriation bills to actually fund the government and fund important projects that taxpayer dollars, these people pay their taxes. This is how taxpayer dollars come back to your districts. We should be doing that. But
so here specifically, she's targeting Trump's proxy in the House of Representatives, Republican Speaker Mike Johnson, who was keeping Congress out of session so as to prevent more political pressure and the swearing in of a new Democratic Congresswoman, Adelita Grijalva, who said that she would be the 218th signature on the discharge petition that would force the release of the Epstein files, or at least force a face-off between the Trump administration and the House of Representatives, because a discharge petition would circumvent Mike Johnson. If you get these 218 signatures, it will force a vote, and nothing Mike Johnson can do to stop it. He can't say, no, you can't do that. At that point, it just becomes inevitable. He is delaying the inevitable, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is calling it out. And the Epstein files have been a bugbear for both Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I think both of them have been stunned by the extent to which Trump has screwed them and screwed his supporters and voters by working through Mike Johnson to prevent the release of the Epstein files. Again, they hesitate to call Trump out by name, so Mike Johnson's a worthy proxy to call out by name and attack. And here's Marjorie Taylor Greene doing just that explicitly.
So right now, Tucker, a lot of people are happy about the government shutdown, but I really have no respect for the House not being in session, and I have no respect for Speaker Johnson not calling us back to Washington, because we should be passing bills.
Right. Here's the thing, and when President Biden was in office and Republicans had control of the House for the last 2 years under the Biden administration, we talked about how, because of Republican incompetence under Kevin McCarthy and Mike Johnson, it was the least productive iteration of Congress on record. This version of Congress is as bad, which is interesting because previously, Republicans could say, well, of course it's not productive because the House is controlled by Republicans and Democrats control the Senate and the White House. What do you expect them to do? Act bipartisanly? To which the first answer is, well, yes, of course, that's what you expect statesmen to do. And we had statesmen in the White House and in the Senate because they were led by Democrats. But Republicans in the age of Trump are not statesmen. So they refused to work bipartisanly, particularly in the House, with Democratic leaders. So, okay, well, that sucks, and that's all the Republicans' fault, but set that aside. Well, you have unified government now. You not only have the White House, the Senate, you also have a 6-3 conservative supermajority on the Supreme Court. So one could make the argument you have a more unified control of the federal government than any Democrat in the past 50 years. So you should have every fucking advantage to passing legislation, and yet you're not. You are passing legislation at a comparable rate to what you did under the Biden administration, when at least then you could say, well, anything we want to pass will be blocked by the Democratic Senate, and even if it makes it through its way through the slim Democratic majority in the Senate, it would be vetoed by President Biden. Well, now your guy's in charge, and it's a cult of personality, and you all are so stupid and incompetent. You still can't get your shit together to pass legislation. So good on Marge for calling Mike Johnson out by name. And at the end of this, I will show you a clip where Johnson reacts to what Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say. But again, what this comes down to is the reason the House isn't in session to try to pass legislation, as Marjorie Taylor Greene knows full well, is because Mike Johnson, and ultimately, whether she or Tucker Carlson will ever admit it, Donald Trump ultimately fears the discharge petition that will force the release of the Epstein files. That's really what this is about.
Let's take, for example, this $40 billion bailout for Argentina. That's probably one of the grossest things I've ever seen. And I have no idea who is telling our great president, our America First president, that this is a good idea. Because it's a punch in the gut to all of our American cattle ranchers, and they are furious, and rightfully so. And at the same time, I can't think of another country that's further away from the United States of America than Argentina. It's literally at the bottom of South America in the Southern Hemisphere, and we're all the way up here at the top. I don't know how that's America First.
So I want to stop right there because it's interesting. We talked about Donald Trump and his decision. I thought it was initially 20, but she's right. It was doubled to $40 billion bailout for Argentina. And so I want to talk about that for a minute. She mentioned again Argentinian beef. So here's what's interesting about that. Note the language. She says, I don't know who's telling our great president, our wonderful president, our America First president. Again, some people will be offended by this, and I don't mean this the way that it might imply, but there is some of AOC in Marjorie Taylor Greene. And here's what I mean. AOC and Marjorie Taylor Greene were both underestimated when they entered politics. I'll be honest with you. I've mentioned this before in interviews. I've mentioned this before in previous videos. I actually went through an enlightened centrist phase right after Donald Trump was elected. I voted against Trump. I voted happily for Hillary Clinton, never voted for Trump. But I got caught up in like YouTube algorithms and listening to Jordan Peterson and Tim Pool and people like that. And even though I consider myself a Democrat and I would have never voted for a Republican, and I stood by that, you know, there was a period when AOC entered politics where she was being bashed because, like, what the hell do you know? She's just some dumb kid who has no experience, and she wants, communism and all this. I never went that far, but I definitely underestimated her. Now I become one of her biggest fans because she has demonstrated a prodigious learning growth and an aptitude for learning. And she's become one of the most not only effective activists within the Democratic Party, but also one of its most effective politicians. She learned at the hands of Jamie Raskin. She learned all about congressional procedure. She's stunning in that respect. She's really, really good, and I am happy to see where she succeeds. I hope she primaries Chuck Schumer and wins a Senate seat because I think that she belongs in the Senate as well. So that aside. Where she and Marjorie Taylor Greene have some things in common is they were both underestimated and treated as idiots. And quite frankly, I still think Marjorie Taylor Greene's a bit of an idiot. But I have since, over the past several weeks, come to appreciate that there's a cleverness there. There's a cunning there, right? She's one of the GOP's biggest fundraisers. And I'm starting to see that beneath the conspiracism and anti-Semitism, there's kind of a bit of a Machiavellian mind. And what am I talking about? Well, here's what I'm talking about. Notice how even as she's complaining about the Trump administration fucking up left, right, and center, what does she do? She says it's not Trump's fault. She goes out of her way to say, I don't know who's telling our great president, our wonderful president, our America First president, treating him like a toddler or an invalid or a dupe, right? And perhaps she means to signal that because, as we discussed, there was some reporting of a bit of bad blood between Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene going back a couple of months ago when she was seriously considering running for the Republican nomination in Georgia for Senate up against John Ossoff. And the polling, even Trump's pollsters, like that would be an electoral bloodbath because, yes, she's really popular in her deep red district, but Ossoff is objectively more popular statewide. He's going to cream her. So she still continued to indicate that she might be running, and Trump had to step in and say, no, don't do this because you're going to cost us the Senate. And she was reportedly very offended by that. So it could be that she's trying to patronize him in a way. I don't know who's I don't know who's telling our wonderful president, manipulating him. Or it could be a recognition that in the short term, again, they both need Donald Trump to be relevant. They both need Donald Trump's power and clout. So they want to simultaneously criticize him, but also not get too far ahead of their skis such that he earns or they earn his disfavor. So they do what everyone does anytime Trump fucks up. And this is indeed a Trump screw up. It's his fault objectively. They blame everyone else around Trump. It's very clever of her to do that. Now, with regards to beef from Argentina, again, as we've discussed, voters are pissed at Trump for that because it is a total breach of the America First agenda. He's getting shit from cattle ranchers and American farmers as well. He should. And they should also be asked, what the hell were you thinking voted for this guy in the first place? Because he screwed you over in his first term, too, with his trade war with China. But I digress. The point is, even John Thune, the Senate Republican leader, is breaking from Trump on this as well. So it's a terrible decision by Trump, a terrible idea. But again, they have to coddle him. Oh, it's not Trump's fault. He's perfect and amazing and a God emperor, but also kind of a small baby. He's just a little baby. And so the people around Trump are really the ones, they're pulling the strings, who's manipulating him, right? So are you saying that Trump's a puppet? You see the implications? Again, very interesting doublespeak from Greene. One last clip from her, and then we're going to turn to Mike Johnson's response.
How does Laura Loomer get to be a Pentagon advisor, but you get primaried? What is that?
I don't know. I've never understood why anyone takes her serious. I mean, this is a woman that can't even legally buy a gun because she had such serious mental problems. She literally posted the other day that she blew blood vessels in her eye as she was hysterically tweeting, 40 or 50 times in one day. Who listens to a person like that? Right. No one should.
Yeah, so of course Laura Loomer is a whack job of epic proportions. She's insane, and she's also the de facto HR director of the Trump White House. She wields enormous influence over Trump, or at least did. She, again, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, they used to be friends, and then they started to hate each other. They're both conspiracy theorists. They're both anti-Semitic. Well, rather, I think Marjorie Taylor Greene is anti-Semitic, and I think Laura Loomer is just an Islamophobe. I think that's her racism and bigotry, and Greene's anti-Semitic. Maybe Greene is both anti-Semitic and Islamophobic. I don't know, but Greene tends to skew more towards anti-Semitism, and Laura Loomer more towards Islamophobia. And they used to be friends, and despite their many things in common, they had a breach. They had a break, and Greene depicts Loomer as being crazier than she is. It's a close call, but Laura Loomer's kind of went through a similar trajectory where she started to criticize Donald Trump publicly, or rather the Trump administration. She tried to avoid criticizing him directly for recent decisions, but it's interesting that they're commenting on their recent beef, pun intended. So we're going to close with Mike Johnson being asked about Marjorie Taylor Greene's recent comments.
We heard from one of your members today, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who wrote this morning that on y'all's GOP conference call, she said Speaker Johnson said he has ideas and pages of policy, but did not say a single policy plan. She said, I find it unacceptable that Republicans are sitting on the sidelines doing nothing to fix this healthcare disaster that is leading many Americans into financial ruin. That's her words. She says you're sitting on the sidelines. What's your response to Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Well, bless her heart. That's an absurd statement.
Bless your heart, by the way, for those of you who are Yankees, I grew up in the South. Bless your heart is Southern coded for fuck you, is what that is.
Obviously, these conference calls are monitored by media, so we're not going to have actual strategy discussions on a line where you have hundreds of people listening in because.
So again, he's just saying, oh, bless your heart, blah, blah, blah. We're not going to talk about strategy. We're in Washington. She's not. So again, the infighting continues. I hope it continues to continue. I hope it escalates dramatically with Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene on one side and Mike Johnson on the other, because a disunified MAGA is less dangerous to the American people than a unified MAGA. There you have it. I'm sure Trump is going to be pissed off about this, seeing and hearing Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson openly shit-talk his administration, even as they try to tiptoe around the problem of him. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.